Hello friends, my name is Chan and this is Daisy, and today we're talking about something very serious, and that is canceled video games, failed live services, games as a service that didn't really end up being a service at all. Anthem was supposed to be the next big thing. From BioWare, you would expect an incredible, deep RPG with awesome lore and story and characters, but it just didn't pan out for several reasons. But they tried sort of reviving it with a project called Anthem Next, which was going to be like the No Man's Sky sort of comeback for the series. So today I wanted to talk about games that had a similar story, that were supposed to be these games as a service, but just totally failed. So first off, a little bit about Anthem. As you can see from this trailer from E3 2017, the game looked cool and it played cool, and there was a lot of elements about it that were good. It wasn't just a bad game, but it certainly didn't have very much direction in terms of it being an RPG, a multiplayer game, a live service game. For one, the campaign felt just unfinished. Like, there was a point in the game that was obvious padding in terms of making the game like a decent length, and also the ending was kind of just a cliffhanger for more story that never ended up coming. Moving on from Anthem, we have the infamous BATTLEBORN, which most people already know about, and I don't have to do much explaining on this one, but I would like to point out that for those of you who aren't aware of really what this game is, it wasn't the Overwatch clone or even a super similar game to Overwatch as most people thought it was. The game is actually more MOBA-like than anything else. Sure, it's a first-person shooter with tank DPS healer style abilities, but it's also got like minions and bases and leveling up and stuff like that. When I actually played the game, I was like shocked at how much it wasn't like Overwatch. I was sort of disappointed when I realized that, and when I played this game for myself, and I was like, man, this could have been something cool if people didn't just immediately jump to the conclusion that Overwatch was somehow this new, wholly original idea that Gearbox was just ripping off or something. I mean, the game was released in May 3rd of 2016, and by June 2017, the game was transitioned into a free-to-play game. Transitioning to a free-to-play game is usually a game's last-ditch effort to try and get players on board, and by this point in the game's life, it just wasn't gonna happen. So the game sort of languished as being a playable game, but it was an online-only game, which meant that as of now, as of January 31st, 2021, you cannot play this game at all. This is a completely dead game. Only a few years after the game was released, it was not for sale, and now you can't even play it at all. The next game is PlanetSide Arena, which is an extremely unfortunate game. I mean, this game was kind of a stinker from the start. The game was delayed several times. It was put into early access, and then very shortly after launching, it was closed down completely. I mean, the game just didn't have any players, and its previous game, PlanetSide 2, actually still has players. It still has a community that are dedicated to PlanetSide 2, and they love the game, and they would love to see a PlanetSide 3, and this was just a weird spin-off that nobody asked for. The game launched on September 18th, 2019, and by January 10th of 2020, the game was completely shut down. According to Steam Spy, PlanetSide Arena had 1,481 concurrent players logged in at launch, and this was the peak of concurrent players. What's crazy about those super low player numbers is that, in case you weren't aware, this game was touted as having 500 player battles. It was supposed to be like a 250 on 250 deathmatch. And when the game only has like 1,000 players, let's be generous, there's 1,500 players. That means you only have 3 full matches going on at one time. And the final head scratcher for this game was that they were actually selling the game. I don't think it was a free to play game. Like PlanetSide 2, you can just download and start playing. But when you need 500 players for a full match and the game costs $20, $30, $40, it's just not going to happen. This next game was made by the Dead by Daylight developers, and it's called DEATHGARDEN, and eventually it went free to play or something, and then they renamed it DEATHGARDEN Blood Harvest. Okay. So as you can see, it's a first-person game. I think maybe the survivors or something play in third person, but it's a more action-oriented take on the villain versus survivors style of gameplay that Dead by Daylight has, but obviously doesn't have the same sort of horror charm. It's definitely still like a dark game, DEATHGARDEN Blood Harvest, but it looks kind of hokey to me. This is another case of a developer just making a game that nobody asked for, that was very similar to a game that they were already developing, and made players question like what the hell they were doing. Like, why are you making this game that's very similar to a game that's extremely popular and everyone loves, Dead by Daylight, and putting all these resources into something that's like not even that inspired or cool or different? This almost looks like a bad ripoff of Dead by Daylight. Releasing in August of 2018, the game finally shut down its servers for good on August of 2020, almost exactly 2 years later. Bleeding Edge is a game from Ninja Theory, creators of, like all the upcoming Xbox games, Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice, and it's done for. All development on it has ceased, and it was, by all accounts, a pretty huge failure. This is another example of a $30 multiplayer game that was just never going to make it when competing with so many good free-to-play multiplayer games. Although I do think the game cost money because it was available on Game Pass, so they were probably just trying to get people to sign up for Game Pass. The game launched in March of 2020, and not even a year later, in January, they announced that the game would be ceasing development and they would be focusing on, their important projects. This next game is kind of a no-brainer considering how boring and bad it looks. I mean, I had zero interest in this game, which is like a cool new take on strategy games and shooters, but by all accounts, it was just really boring. And this being Disintegration, which was touted as the next game from Halo developers, and very quickly got shut down. While most games here are either still technically playable and their support was just dropped, or they shut down after a couple of years, Disintegration lost multiplayer capabilities only a few months after launch. The game launched in June of 2020, and by November of 2020, multiplayer was totally gone. According to the studio, quote, "The game unfortunately struggled to build a significant audience necessary for a compelling multiplayer experience." So they kind of just straight up said, yo, nobody's playing this. We're going to shut it down. Again, this is an example of a game that cost like $30 or $40. And of course, it didn't find a multiplayer audience because people were busy playing better games that cost $0. A lot of people are pointing to Avengers now that Anthem Next got canceled, and I don't blame them because this game was a massive failure. Even just sales-wise, not even talking about like the live service portion of it, this game just lost Square Enix so much money. And we'll see if they continue development on this, if they actually follow their roadmap and add all these new characters and stuff like that. But I'm really doubting it. And even if they do, I don't think they'll ever find a large audience. There are like a few hundred people playing the game on Steam, and there are hundreds of thousands of people playing a small indie game like Valheim. It just makes you question AAA development in general. We're talking about the Avengers here too. Like, this game should have been a huge success, and instead it was a massive flop. Something's gotta give here, people. We can't keep making games like this. So that's it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. Thank you for smashing that like button and commenting. What game have you played that got shut down, that made you that made you cry? You know, I played what was it called, Lawbreakers? I was one of the few people that bought Lawbreakers, and I thought it was kind of fun. That was pretty good. Although I did get lucky, and I refunded the game before, you know, shit hit the fan. And so, you know, I got to experience that game. I can now say that I played Lawbreakers, and no harm, no foul. You know, I got my $30 back. It was all good. So, again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace. Bye, Daisy. Bye, Daisy.